speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Brownson, serves as lead for the solar option within the Renewable Energy and Sustainable Systems Program. Dr. Brownson's research is focused on solar resource assessment and systems performance and photovoltaics in buildings. He has also participated with the DOE Sunshot Initiative for solar forecasting in the DOE Energy Efficient Buildings Hub at the Pennsylvania Naval Yard. Dr. Brownson also serves as a faculty lead for the Penn State team in the 2009 Solar Decathlon held in Washington, D.C. He's a member of the American Solar Energy Society's Board of Directors, representing the interests and voice of students and faculty and advocating the critical importance of our young professionals in the health and future of the industry.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming out. And so part of my job tonight is to kind of give you that, how might we see an option outward? And solar energy is certainly one of those really positive images for a lot of society. So the starting point that I want to think about, I just kind of want to frame solar energy before I start talking about where solar energy might fit inside of the future for Penn State, for Pennsylvania, for the nation. The first thing we want to kind of do is to kind of get everybody up to speed, because a lot of people will come into the story of solar energy with information that is outdated. And that information is outdated about every year now, because the industry grows exponentially and it changes dramatically. So what you're seeing is this kind of price of photovoltaics. So photovoltaics are the panels that generate electricity from the sun's light. It's one form of solar energy conversion that we think about. But it's a great proxy for kind of the movement forward of solar energy as a technology in today's society. So you're seeing 1977 as that really tall bar up there, at which point the cost of manufacturing a unit of a solar panel was about $76, $77 a watt. And then you see that kind of really steep drop off in curve until we get over to 2014, at which point the cost of manufacturing a solar panel is now about 74 cents. And again, what I'm saying about things changing very dramatically is now we're down in the 60-cent range. It is changing dramatically, and that dramatic change in cost of manufacturing is happening as the industry learns how to make new photovoltaic panels. And so what that process is called, it was given a name much like when we think about microchips and we think about the effect of how microchips will get smaller and smaller and smaller as the industry gets bigger and bigger. That effect is replicated in a sense, and it was called the Swanson effect. This is after Richard Swanson, who was a leader, is a leader at the Sun Power Company, a photovoltaic manufacturing company. And effectively, we find, just from the data, that we have a 17 to 24% drop in the cost of making photovoltaics every time the industry doubles in size. Okay? Now, the next question is, how often does the industry double in size? Well, nowadays, it's less than 2 years. So every 2 years, the photovoltaic industry effectively doubles in size. And this is a global scenario. So this is an exponential growth phenomenon. The same thing that we hear like David Suzuki talking about when we have too much growth and eventually we run out of Earths, and so we make another Earth and it makes us last for one more second or along those lines. The same kind of exponential growth is in a growth trend for photovoltaics. So it's growing faster than you might think, and so the thoughts, the data that you might have had from 5 years ago was at least 2 doublings ago. And so we have to stay current with what's happening. What happens when photovoltaics grows is other interest in solar technologies grow. And so we have awareness of solar technologies increasing, and that is other technologies like solar for hot water systems, using solar for hot air systems. Actually looking at the way that we look at the entire building system as a solar energy collector or a control system for managing solar energy. That awareness builds as we have more and more understanding for solar energy as a technology just kind of permeating through society. And so what we're going to see with photovoltaics especially, but largely solar energy technologies in general,
is the same thing as the cell phone effect. You know, you're going to be 1 year, okay, a couple people have these. 5 years later, okay, well, it seems like all the wealthy people have these now, and maybe a couple of years later, all of a sudden, everybody has a mobile phone. And then a year later, people in Africa, in rural Africa, have a mobile phone. In India, have a mobile phone, right? This spread happened in a viral way. The same thing is going to happen, and is happening with solar energy, and it's happening at a global scale. So the other part of this is that the cost is changing for solar energy with time, but if we look across this plot, this is actually like these curves that you're seeing here are things that are called levelized costs of energy. It's basically like how much is effectively the cheapest cost for energy as electricity in different parts of the world. And what you're seeing is these bubbles are, if we follow the bubbles across to the right, it's more and more solar energy per year in a different country. So we can see that that Mexico has a lot of solar energy, California has a lot of solar energy. If we go further to the left, eventually we're going to get to, you should see in the middle there, New Jersey. You could just as well write Pennsylvania. Okay? That's about the same solar budget. And if you look up from New Jersey, you see the country that we have right above there, that's France. Okay? And I'm going to tie that in just a second, but just keep that in mind that the amount of sun that New Jersey has is more than France has. Okay? The curves, as what we're seeing, is the cost of energy. So as they go up, I'm living in a place with more and more expensive energy. So it's not surprising that Hawaii, up in the upper right, has a high cost of energy. It's in an island. To get energy to the island is very expensive, and it has a lot of sunlight. If we look at these lines of levelized cost of energy, that line is kind of a penetration curve at which point solar is an option. It's not only an option, it is the equivalent cost option. It is the option that you're going to choose because not only will it be carbon free, and in fact, photovoltaics tend to pay themselves back as a carbon budget within about 3 years. Not only will they be carbon free over their lifetime, but they will cost the same as your other electricity sources. So why wouldn't you choose them, right? So here's the big challenge. This is the other perception of bugaboo. And that is that if we live in Pennsylvania, we are embedded in an energy-rich culture. Very energy-rich, right? This is historically where we have booms of oil, booms of coal, multiple booms of coal, now booms of natural gas. We are second or third nuclear power plant generation in the nation. We are rich in energy. And it does something to perceptions. It really does something to perceptions because everywhere you go in Pennsylvania, when I came here 7 years ago, the standard message was, well, we can't really do solar here because we really don't have a lot of sun. And you understand that you're doing solar, but this is not the best place to do solar. If you are a solar person, you will go to any state in the nation and you will find a community that will tell you, in Santa Barbara, we really don't have enough sun. So it's a perception thing. It's not about metrics. And this is where I've got a map that is sliced across the middle because we want to exclude Arizona because everybody reads those maps and they see Arizona has all this sunshine. We have about 75 to 80% of what Arizona has as a net annual budget. That's not bad. But if you cut it out of the map, because actually most of the older maps of solar resource were actually done by non-geographers, and so they're really biased representations of data. If you cut that out, you see that we have this kind of nice orangey realm all through Pennsylvania, and we're actually, a better resource than this little city here, which is Freiburg, Germany. Freiburg, Germany is the solar capital of the world. This is where major solar energy research is happening, and it's happening because the cost of energy in Germany is very high. And the cost of energy in Germany is very high because in the 1970s, the public decided to not invest in nuclear power. And what are my options of not investing in nuclear power? Well, we're going to invest a lot more in renewables. Okay? So, you're seeing here also Madrid, Rome, Bordeaux, Freiburg. So we want to know where state colleges. It falls somewhere between Rome and Bordeaux. Okay, I'm okay with living between Rome and Bordeaux. Really nice. Okay? And the other thing is that when people come to visit State College, when they come to visit Happy Valley, when do they come? Football season. You know what the most cloudy season in all of State Colleges? Football season. It's a very cloudy, rainy type of area. So because of that, every visitor comes in and then they leave with the memory of the impression that, don't really have much solar. But we do. And so we need to measure solar energy, and that's what we do. So at State College, here at State College, we have one of the world resources for measuring solar energy. It was built here years before I arrived. It was like having a Christmas present right there. You know, you arrive, here is one of 7 of the nation's best solar monitoring stations. Yours, data is free. And what ended up happening was one of my former graduate students, Andrew Porschke, graduated and then used an awesome statistical software to download all this data over years to show you the sun beat of State College. So this is like a heartbeat, but it's the sun beat. This is each year's beat of the sun. And so across the top, you're seeing the total energy of the sun beating across year after year. The next one is the beam. That's the bright beam of the sun beating through. And then the lowest one is the diffuse sky, the light that's coming from all directions. But you know, we've got a lively resource here, and we measure it. And from those measurements, we know that we have the resource that we need to develop solar energy. Okay? And I think one of those things that I want to say, why do we perceive solar energy in a strange way? It's that our eyes are not built to be effective solar detectors in a linear range, in a range that we want to know what is a good solar resource. Our eyes are extremely good at telling us, is that a lion in the dark? Is that a bear in the path? In Pennsylvania, that's actually pretty relevant. I run into bears walking my dog. But my eyes can, sense that that is probably a bear and not a very large man ahead, and I can go back the other direction when the lights are very, very dim. When the lights are very, very bright, when it's a very, very bright day, my information in my eyes all adjust to give me information about what the scenario is. So great information processors, but they're basically these, they detect the highs and they detect the lows. They don't do so good in the mid-range. It can't tell you what's going on in the mid-range. And in fact, your skin is actually a better solar detector than your eyes in this sense, right? But so we've got bias detectors. We should use the detectors that we normally have. And that brings us now to talking about what we've been trying to develop here at Penn State. And that is an opportunity for developing solar on state. So we have a student chapter of the American Solar Energy Society. And that student chapter is very active and has been trying to develop photovoltaic array, photovoltaic demonstration on Penn State's campus for the last 6 or 7 years, if not more. Okay? And we have a great demonstration of solar energy in the Morningstar home. That is the 2007 solar decathlon home. And so props to Lisa, who's here, and where am I missing? Lisa. Okay, we've got multiple people who were part of the design process, who managed the Morningstar home, and you yourself can go and visit and see solar energy on display at Penn State. What we want is more. We want it bigger. And so we pushed for solar on state, but here's the deal. The cost of electricity in this area is very, very low. And there is an obligation for Penn State, to buy energy in a way that is responsible. Okay? And at this point, part of that evaluation is lowest cost. And we do a very good job of negotiating prices for the cost of electricity. If we want to get solar energy on Penn State's campus, we have a financial bridge that we have to gap. Or a gap that we have to bridge. And that gap can be done. But we've thought of it before as, well, do we do this from like a major donor, major investor, an angel fund that comes in? Well, that's an opportunity, that's a possibility. That we'll wait for that. We can maybe develop that. But is there a way that we can do this that would engage the community, that would become a community participating process to help build a community solar array. And that has a lot of commonalities with what I'm sure you'll be hearing about at the close of the meeting, with a community-based solar array on community farmland. In our case, we're trying to think about this because we want a representation, we want to show leadership at Penn State for the photovoltaic array that we're participating in, and we want to draw in the community to be part of that ownership. So in a sense, this concept, this basic process is a solar garden. Okay, so we have community farms, we have share-based farming happening, right? Why can't we do that with photovoltaics? Why can't we develop a crowd-based way to grow photovoltaic projects, to grow solar projects? We think we can do that. What we are planning right now is to grow that first through setting up an alignment with stakeholders. So one of the things that I think should fall in line very closely with what you were introduced to by Laura was the idea that before we move forward, before we actually create conflict by just proposing something and running with it, what we would like to do is we'd like to follow an integrated design process. We'd like to engage stakeholders and see if we can't create alignment first, which is going to take more time, but in the end, maybe less likely to have a catastrophic failure midway, and we'll actually have those interpersonal relationships founded early in the process, rather than trying to resolve them later in the process. So in about midsummer here, in about 6 to 8 weeks' time, we will be developing a workshop where we want to bring in community members, where we want to bring in students, we want to bring in expertise from the solar field to come together to start to create this vision to move forward for community solar on state. And I'm leading that development, and so if you are interested in it, you're more than welcome to email me. I will start compiling this into a list, and we will be announcing the workshop as it comes up. And hopefully we'll find this alignment to actually do that jumpstart to get solar on Penn State's campus. So, thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I've heard inclinations that some companies might see by putting solar on houses and then collecting the time
Right.
to get the renewable energy back.
Right.
Is that something that you also
So we have pursued that. I mean, effectively, that is what we would call a power purchase agreement, or something like a leasing strategy. That has been one of the generations of the solar on state process. About 3 years ago, we got very close to one of those processes, but ultimately that gap that we were trying to bridge, we couldn't get with that. So the idea is the firm who comes in and wants to develop that, tied into the lease, has to have some sign of low risk profitability out of this. And we happen to be in a scenario where our price of electricity is negotiated so low that it's very challenging. So if we were trying to do this in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh, we could do this as a no-brainer. It is part of our challenge being rurally located that our cost of electricity is, for us, conveniently low, but for that kind of scenario that you're talking about becomes very challenging to negotiate. So you actually have to evaluate it and think about it in terms of the lifetime of the array.
Yeah.
And those arrays will last for 50 years, but or more, but the actual concept in terms of the lifetime of the contract might be a 25-year contract, whereas the institutions need to consider how does the payback work out within a shorter time horizon. So 5 to 10 years, 8 years at most oftentimes, is the flexibility for the university. But again, pursuing it as a simple lease or what we would call a power purchase agreement at Penn State is not a
I say is a possible strategy, but it wouldn't engage the community. It would probably not be sustainable. It would be a one-off. We wouldn't be able to grow other projects from the concept of it. And then one of the ideas with the community-based project, much as you were probably going to hear shortly, is can we create a model that we can export? And can we grow it to other places? And so in the process of developing community solar on Penn State, one of the things that we want to do is we want to document the process. We want to show where we have successes, where we have challenges. We want that encapsulated, and we want to be able to export that model such that other universities could pick that up. But I tell you what, if we can do it at Penn State, there are a lot of other institutions that can do this. Because we have a very challenging scenario. What we have is an enormous alumni base. What we have is a very large population of people with a lot of willpower. So it can come, it's just going to be a multi-stakeholder solution.
It's not leading that that curve, Swanson curve, with
Yeah.
50% of what. Looking down the road, 20, 30, maybe 50 years, we see that pretty much every building in the world will just have photovoltaic. And it's wall, it's roof, everything will be pretty much standardized. You won't have to get an engineer to design the system for you. It'll be, you go to Lowe's and you buy your everything. Battery technology for the roofs, so you've got much better control. So effectively, what I'm talking about is, the power grid, as you know it, would be greatly reduced.
True. I think that if we think of it only in terms of buildings, we won't make it. The idea of plastering every rooftop across the nation with photovoltaics is kind of an ideal concept, but one, not everybody wants photovoltaics on their buildings, no matter how integrated you might think of them. And two, there's only, in residential buildings, there's been studies, there's only about 30% of residential rooftops that are actually accessible for solar, and commercial buildings is probably only 60%, and we need much, much more, ultimately, spread out to accomplish our goals. That being said, now we need to think about systems integration, where maybe we're having photovoltaics that are combined with pasture land. Okay, so maybe we have a grazing land combined with photovoltaic panels that is actually serving a nearby urban center. The more urbanized we get, right, the less rooftop I actually have for the density of population that I have. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that we need to have photovoltaics to solve all our problems in solar energy, in energy use, and the building energy demand can be radically changed from where we're at to. Yes?
Is there enough materials, substances that go into these photovoltaic cells in water supplies and so on around the world to really have this thing ramp up?
Yes. So the main material we think of is silicon, which is derived from the silica that is in sand. Actually, silicon is the second most abundant element in the Earth's crust. So we have enough of that, but we also have abundant supplies of other alternate materials. And essentially, when we say that the learning curve for silicon has had a really, pleasant drop for these photovoltaic prices, that actually has followed the microelectronics industry. So it's actually the learning curve that's been paired. I mean, so photovoltaics has actually benefited from riding alongside the silicon manufacturing for microelectronics. So yes, we have enough. It's one of those scenarios where we are using a very earth-abundant material, and we wouldn't be in a scenario of creating like a strategic mineral, the way that we think of rare earth minerals. So one of the kind of media blunders that has happened is people put out that rare earth minerals are inside the photovoltaics. They're not. They're in batteries. They're in magnets. But they're not in photovoltaics. So it's odd, but it's it's a scientific fine point, but they're not. So we don't actually have a strategic mineral problem. Yes, sir. Oh, the solar hybrids. So so the development ideas are there are many ideas out there. One of the ideas is to develop a solar highway, or to either incorporate photovoltaics inside of the pavement. Or in Germany, they've already had photovoltaic, and actually Germany and maybe even Oregon has strips of highway that use right-of-way to incorporate photovoltaics along the sides. Those are absolutely possibilities, and honestly are probably more likely to be captured because of just land use, and that we can maybe accomplish it in a large swath. Yes, sir?
Good evening. So one of the things you mentioned a lot about was overcast and all this, and I hear all the time about how Penn State, or State College in area is comparable to Seattle in terms of climate.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, so this is kind of a two-part question. In regards to that, do you think that solar energy, like how would you make the argument that solar energy is the best alternative energy use instead of wind? Because I think right now we use 10% wind energy. And the other part of that was, you mentioned as well that the cloudiest time for Penn State is during the fall, where you have the most traffic and all that. So because we're a state, because we're a university area where almost like half our town and population leaves over the summer where it's most sunny, how do we, are there processes for solar energy to store a lot of energy, a lot of time to allow that energy that's used in sun that really isn't used as much to be used during the fall and during the spring and during the seasons?
So, first off, is Pennsylvania like Seattle for solar conditions? It's sunnier. Okay. Okay. This is where we benefit from having faculty members who have actually lived in this area. No, that's actually a cloudy day indicator, which any meteorologist would tell you is actually a really, really loose term and has nothing to do with the actual solar resource. Actually, we've been working extensively at Penn State with meteorological faculty, and it's been a great learning process of tying science and engineering of the solar conversion process with meteorologists to say, you know, we both are missing basic pieces to actually combine this and estimate. But if we go back to storage issues and stuff like that, we are at such a low penetration percentage of photovoltaics. I mean, we are less than 1% of the electricity in the grid. We're less than 0.5%. I think we are maybe 0.2%. Okay? I would worry about storage when we hit 5. Okay? And then we've got a good run to go before that happens. But here's the deal. When we start hitting those larger percentages, we're talking about maybe 10 years out. Okay? By the time we get 2018, 4 years from now, the levelized cost of energy will be actually, there will be a majority of the planet where areas will have levelized cost of energy, and the adoption of solar will really cross the threshold, I think, tipping point. But storage is growing at the same time. So right now, right here, we don't worry about storage. We generate a small fraction of renewable energy through solar. We share it with the grid. And the grid is most definitely a mixture of fossil fuels and nuclear power. And we grow that. And as retrofits and renovations come around, we start thinking about what our options are, and storage will be coming online. It's just not quite there yet, but it will be. Thank you for your time.
Once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. We will be staying after. We have just signed up from our state organizing for action organization here. We have Mark Maloney from Green More Gardens and OFA, and also we will all be sticking around to answer any more questions. And so, informal setting following this meeting. Thanks for coming out. We really hope that you've taken something away from this. We hope that we can work with some of your groups